Hey, just to relate the last answer to your previous question about the upper story and lower story, this was a concept from Francis Schaeffer, the idea that, and it also reflects something of what in contemporary secular philosophy that's called the fact-value divide. And the idea that there are these facts of the world that we can know by observation, through scientific methods that are real and objective, but we have no knowledge, objective knowledge, of religious or moral propositions, and that these two sorts of things are of two different kinds. And so the only things we can really know are things that we know empirically through the senses, through the processed by the scientific method. And I think the previous illustration was in some ways suggests that we may have moral knowledge as well. We may not get it through the senses, it may be innate, but we have a kind of universal moral knowledge. We may have both empirical knowledge and innate knowledge of the reality of God. Yesterday I was speaking with someone in this very room who was telling me about a survey of young children in 4 to 5, in the kind of kindergarten age, all around the world. And when asked questions about their beliefs, almost universally young children have a belief that there is some sort of benevolent creator who made them, who had them in mind, and they have to be kind of educated out of that view. So Calvin, the Protestant theologian, had the idea that, or the concept of a sensus divinitatis, that there is a kind of innate knowledge of God. You could debate whether or not that's true or not, but a philosophical definition of knowledge is justified true belief. And as a scientist and philosopher, I'm convinced there is justified true beliefs about God that we can have. Namely, in the first instance, that God exists. I think there are empirical and rational justifications for that belief, and therefore I think we can have knowledge of God the same way we have knowledge of the world around us.
Well, I completely agree with that, and I also think that I'm so glad you gave me that answer.
And so what follows from that is that the upper story and the lower story, as that metaphor is used in philosophy, are not separate.
They are not separate.
And in fact, knowing the lower story is not just a matter of sense perception. It also requires us to make certain assumptions about the world that cannot be verified empirically. This was the import of, say, David Hume's work or Immanuel Kant's work in epistemology in the period of modern philosophy. In order to come to something like an inductive generalization about the laws, what we would call the laws of nature, we have to first assume that there's a uniformity of nature such that our observations are in some way representative of the way nature generally works, even though we can't observe nature at all times and in all places. But is that assumption of uniformity of nature something that we can prove empirically? It's not, because it's making a claim about the way nature works at all times and in all places, and we don't have the capacity to make observations about nature in all times and all places. So there are many assumptions that we bring to bear in processing sense data to make sense of the world scientifically. In other words, our knowledge of the lower story depends upon a priori assumptions that we make that cannot be proven simply by observation. And so both we have knowledge, we can have knowledge of things in the upper story, moral propositions about the existence of God, but we have knowledge of things in the world in the lower story in virtue of assumptions that we make that are really not justifiable scientifically, but rather they're philosophical assumptions or innate assumptions that we make. And so I think that the simplistic division of knowledge into science and everything else has really failed in philosophy. That was the project of what's known as logical positivism.
And wouldn't you say the ancients overall, from our standpoint today, had a lot more agreement about the ability to have moral truth, etc., and that maybe the 1800s, starting before then, but really drilled into that and tried to destroy that foundation, and we're still recovering from that.
But just think about that, about the idea of moral knowledge. Is there anyone who, at that point where someone is about to kick an old lady in the shins for pure sadistic pleasure, is there anyone who really doubts their visceral response to that impending action and say, no, that is wrong. They don't say, well, am I 98% sure of this, or am I? No, they have knowledge and are convinced that is a wrong action that's about to be undertaken. You know, so I think it's appropriate to call some things in the upper story forms of knowledge. Yeah.